I want to turn to our guests here on set. Chuck Todd, NBC News chief political analyst, and Mark Short, an NBC News political analyst who knows a little something about vice presidential picks. Mark, I'm going to get to you in a minute. Chuck, let me start with you. Yes. You and I have been trying to figure out who's it going to be for weeks, if not months. It is J.D. Vance. It's a sign that Donald Trump is doubling down on his MAGA principles. The question is, from an electoral perspective, does this help him? I mean, does it help him win over Nikki Haley voters? Does it help him win over moderates, independents?
This doesn't feel like a political pick to me, or an election or a campaign pick. This feels like a messaging pick, as you put it, or, you know, look, I think it makes a really sort of makes a dramatic shift in the direction of the party. Like, if you didn't know where this party is headed, it is a much different party, a protectionist party on trade, a little bit more isolationist, depending on how your point of view on that, but a version of certainly less international expansion when it comes to American national security. Look, I think it's notable it's the first veteran on a ticket since John McCain.
Yeah.
And I think it's notable that he chose a millennial. The generational thing is not, you know, and I think you certainly can see J.D. Vance as being a very articulate spokesperson outside of the boomers. But this comes with risk, because there's a lot of paper trail on him. He's only been a senator for 2 years. He sort of is a convert to all this, right? He's not even 40. Look, Mark and I are a little bit older. Like, you know, your life, you know, it's funny how your own politics can shift and evolve. You know, he's so new. He was new to the Never Trump movement in 16. Then he was new to the MAGA movement in 18. You know, here he is. You know, so you know, we'll see. I think Democrat, of all the candidates that he could have picked, this is the one they hoped Trump would pick. So that tells you something. They feel like there's a lot of material to work with. And I think just like with Sarah Palin, who's the last time someone with this little electoral experience ended up on a ticket, it's a race to define him nationally, and this is going to be quite the race.
Well, and as you say that, Chuck, the Biden campaign is already saying they are going to paint him as extreme. We should note that our White House team is reporting that the Vice President Kamala Harris, has called J.D. Vance. She apparently left a message. Mark Short wasn't able to reach him. You obviously are a top aide to former Vice President Mike Pence. You were a part of that process. You remember it well when he was chosen to be Trump's running mate. Talk a little bit about this moment, the significance of it, and what you make of the pick of J.D. Vance. As Chuck says, it's not without risks.
Well, look, I think it's a very different time in 2024 than it was in 2016.
Yes.
When we were here in Cleveland, don't forget, the number 2, Ted Cruz, number 2 candidate in the primary, refused to endorse Donald Trump at the convention. And so I think that Mike Pence brought many of the conservatives, the Tea Party conservatives, to the party. I don't think that's the case at this point. To Chuck's point, I think it's less of a political pick, but it's a dramatic shift in where the party's going. It's not just the isolationist foreign policy. It's not just a protectionist trade policy. It's a guy who wants a bigger regulatory state. It's a guy who's applauded Biden's FTC commissioner at a time when most Republicans are most concerned that many trade deals are getting tied up because of a burdensome regulatory environment. And so it's a very, very populist pick, in no way a traditional conservative pick.
Yeah, I mean, he was right at the center of so much of the debate over whether to send more money to Ukraine. He was absolutely opposed to it, to your point. He really underscores those isolation.
You know, Kristen, he went to the Munich Security Conference.
Yeah.
And advocated basically for less aid for Ukraine. It was a dramatic thing for him to do, but it was really uncomfortable for most people at the Munich conference because they're not used to an American, or, you know, somebody coming representing the United States sort of advocating for a retreat.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that issue. On so many other issues, Democrats are going to be looking at this pick and have plenty to work with. Let me go to Garrett Haake, who is on the convention floor as well, right in the middle of all of the action. Garrett, where are you? What are the delegates telling you where you are?
Well, Kristen, I'm in the back of the hall right now with New Mexico at the moment. I was talking to delegates as the pick was becoming news, and I heard a lot of welcome to it. You know, I spoke to members of the Idaho delegation. I spoke to some folks in the Michigan delegation, and I think we shouldn't be surprised that the people in this room are very excited about the J.D. Vance pick. That's the idea. I mean, this is the pick of a confident campaign here who thinks that their strategy is working and they just need somebody who can help them execute it a little better. If you're the Trump campaign trying to reach these, battleground Rust Belt state voters, those young men in particular, disaffected from the Democratic Party, J.D. Vance, the only veteran of the four main players on this ticket, can be your guy. I heard that in Michigan. I heard that in Idaho. And I heard it from Laura Trump, the vice chair of the RNC and the president's daughter-in-law, who really told me that she does see this as almost a laying of hands, Donald Trump actually picking a successor, something he has not really wanted to do, but identifying somebody who can be the next generation MAGA voice in J.D. Vance.
I think you're absolutely right. And Kimberly Guilfoyle earlier during an interview with Jacob Soboroff, Garrett, really focused on that point, the importance of the vice presidential pick. Chuck, she was making the case that this pick takes on new significance in the wake of that assassination attempt against former President Trump. Yet another moment in this presidential race that we could not have imagined, and that quite frankly has upended the race once again.
No, and I also think it means more people. I mean, this is both the opportunity and risk.
Yes.
And I say the opportunity, I think there are more people in America wanting to see how Donald Trump's responding, are going to want to say, after given the events, and by the way, his age and Joe Biden's age, where the vice presidential debate will feel a little more significant. But I also want to ratchet things back here. There have been plenty of vice presidential picks that have been negative on candidates who have won the presidency anyway. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew, George H.W. Bush and Dan Quayle. So I am not, and some would even would argue that Joe Biden didn't pick the strongest running mate at times. So, this election isn't going to be decided by the running mates. What these running mates can do, though, is become distractions. To me, they're never net positives for a campaign. They only are either neutral or they are distractions. Yeah. And that's, you just hope it isn't too big of a distraction.
And Trump is someone, Mark Short, who you get the sense he picks a running mate almost begrudgingly. He doesn't really think he needs a running mate in some senses. It does come against, again, the backdrop of this horrific assassination attempt against the former president. We cannot forget that is sort of infusing this entire event. And one of the things I'll be watching for is the tone. Right now, it's obviously incredibly celebratory. They are celebrating the fact that Donald Trump has officially become their party's nominee. But I think in the speeches, it will be fascinating to see. He said he's rewritten his speech to be one of unity.
Right. Well, look, I think that J.D. Vance, I don't think hurts Trump politically. I accept Chuck's point. I don't know what he really adds to it. But I think this race can be about the top two of the ticket. It gets very polarizing. But he is a rags to riches story. He's a man who served the Marines. He served our country. He's an incredibly articulate spokesman. I do go back to our first point, though. It is a dramatic shift in what the Republican Party believes and stands for. And I think that can't be underscored enough. It's a direct signal that we're headed in a far more populist direction with our policy than the traditional conservatism that this party has stood for so many decades.
Mark, you were saying this to me. You actually think he hired a spokesperson. That's how he almost views J.D. Vance, as a spokesperson of the movement.
He's incredibly articulate, and he can represent the president's viewpoints. And I think in many ways, that is what he saw as the advantage in J.D. Vance, is somebody who can go out there and be his surrogate.
Almost what Pete Buttigieg, the role Pete Buttigieg plays for Joe Biden.
Well, and we've seen J.D. Vance. We've seen, quite frankly, all of the vice presidential candidates out on the circuit, running the traps, doing the tough interviews. Garrett, before I let you go, because I know it's very loud where you are, talk a little bit about your understanding of how the horrific assassination attempt against former President Trump might infuse this convention. As you have reported, he is overhauling his speech, and yet we don't necessarily expect every speech to be changed.
No, that's right, Kristen. And I think we should probably adjust our standards accordingly for what Donald Trump's idea of a speech more about unity will be about. I mean, this is what he said. He said he's basically taken out a speech that he thought was too tough, and now he wants to unite the country. A few hours later, he sent out a Truth Social post about the documents case getting thrown out, in which he used a lot of the same divisive language for which he's become known, talking about hoaxes and witch hunts and Joe Biden-led conspiracies. So his idea of a unifying message can often mean unify around me where I am, as opposed to I'm going to put my arms around you and we're all going to move closer together. So I think we should probably moderate our expectations in that way. And I think just even looking at the speakers tonight, for example, somebody like a Glenn Youngkin offers a very different sense of a unifying figure than does Marjorie Taylor Greene, both of whom on the speaker's card tonight. There's sort of only so much you can move a party that has become so aggressive in sort of its natural posture back towards a kinder, gentler, big tent welcome, which is, I think, what obviously you want your convention to present when you're trying to reach some of those voters who may not have been paying attention until later in the political year.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.